1816 was the year the world changed. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, the sun seemed to abandon the earth, shrouding the world in an unnatural gloom. It was the summer that never came, a time when the familiar rhythms of life were disrupted by an unrelenting cold. The skies remained overcast, casting a dim, sickly light over the land. Crops failed as frost clung to fields well into the summer months. Rivers froze in July, an unnatural sight that left people fearful and confused. An eerie mist hovered over towns and villages, its presence so thick that it seemed to swallow the land whole. Farmers, once hopeful for a fruitful season, stood helplessly as their harvests perished before they had a chance to grow. Livestock, deprived of food and warmth, collapsed where they stood, their lifeless forms littering the barren fields. The air smelled of damp decay, a scent that only deepened the unease creeping into the hearts of those who struggled to survive. But the chaos of 1816 did not arise from nowhere. It had begun the year before, far from the lands it would later devastate. In April 1815, Mount Tambora, a massive volcano in the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, erupted with an explosive force unseen in recorded history. The blast was so powerful that it tore apart the mountain itself, sending ash, molten rock, and toxic gases into the atmosphere. Thousands perished instantly, entire villages swallowed by fire and debris. But the true horror of Tambora's eruption would not be felt until much later. The thick veil of ash spewed into the sky did not simply fall back to Earth. Instead, it drifted upward, reaching the stratosphere, where high-altitude winds carried it across the globe. A dense, suffocating layer of sulfuric particles spread like an invisible shroud, dimming the sun's light and altering the very fabric of the world's climate. With the sun's warmth obscured, temperatures plummeted. Snow fell in summer, covering once thriving farmlands in an unnatural white. Crops that had managed to sprout shriveled under unexpected frost, their fragile stems blackened by the cold. The changing weather patterns led to violent storms, torrential rains flooding cities already struggling to survive. People, unable to comprehend the cause, sought explanations in faith and superstition. Preachers warned of divine punishment, claiming the heavens had turned against mankind. In villages, frightened whispers spoke of omens, of a world nearing its end. Some turned to desperate measures, rituals, sacrifices, anything that might appease an unseen force they believed was punishing them. But there was no divine hand at play, only the ruthless indifference of nature. Mount Tambora's eruption had set into motion a chain of events that would leave millions suffering. Famine swept through nations as food supplies dwindled. Cities filled with the desperate and dying, their weakened bodies falling victim to disease. The world had become an unfamiliar and unforgiving place. The sun, the eternal symbol of life and warmth, had vanished behind an impenetrable curtain of darkness, leaving humanity to navigate a year that felt more like the prelude to an apocalypse. The eerie twilight of 1816 brought more than just hunger. It brought an overwhelming sense of dread. The sun, once a source of life and warmth, was now nothing more than a pale, sickly glow struggling to break through the endless veil of gray. Across Europe, once thriving farmlands lay barren, their soil frozen and unyielding even in the heart of summer. The air carried an unnatural chill, whispering through skeletal trees stripped bare of their leaves. In the cities, the streets filled with the sound of wailing children, their frail bodies clinging to mothers who could no longer provide for them. Hunger was no longer just a threat, it was a shadow creeping through every home, gnawing at the bones of the weak and weary. In North America, freak snowstorms blanketed fields and settlements well into June, turning what should have been a season of renewal into a graveyard of failed harvests. No one had ever seen a summer like this. No one had ever felt such despair. In a world where food became more valuable than gold, desperation turned to violence. The wealthy hoarded what little they had, locking away grain and salted meats behind guarded doors. The poor, left with nothing, scavenged through waste, fighting over rotting scraps discarded by those more fortunate. Bread riots erupted in cities across Europe, where once orderly marketplaces turned into battlegrounds of starving masses clawing at dwindling supplies. In some villages, Farmers, faced with the horrifying reality of their failing crops, began mixing sawdust and straw into what little flour remained, an act of survival that did little to ease the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs. Those too weak to fight or steal simply lay where they fell, their bodies lining the roads, and buried and forgotten. Disease followed in famine's wake, striking down even those who had managed to hold on a little longer. The world teetered on the edge of collapse, its people caught in a nightmare that refused to end. Yet, amid the horror, something unexpected took root. The unrelenting darkness and bitter cold drove people indoors, locking them away from a world that seemed to be unraveling. In Geneva, Switzerland, a group of writers gathered in a candlelit villa, seeking refuge from the endless gloom. Among them was a young woman named Mary Shelley. The stormy, sunless summer confined them within the walls of Villa Diodati, where the flickering glow of candlelight cast eerie shadows along the walls. With the world outside resembling a vision of the apocalypse, they sought solace in storytelling. It was here, in this unnatural night, that Shelley found inspiration in death itself. The chilling landscapes, the tales of unrelenting misery, the fear of a world losing control, it all gave birth to a single, unforgettable creation. A story of a scientist who dared to play God, of a creature stitched together from lifeless flesh, being brought to life in a world of suffering. Without the endless darkness of 1816, Frankenstein might never have been born. The year without summer left scars that would linger for generations. It was a time of chaos and uncertainty, a test of human endurance against forces far beyond understanding. The famine left millions in ruin, reshaping societies and economies across continents. Yet, even in its cruelty, it inspired art, literature, and scientific inquiry. The world had endured a year that felt like the end of times, but it did not break completely. Out of the ashes of starvation and fear, new ideas emerged, proof that even in the darkest moments, human resilience could find a way to persist. While the people of 1816 suffered under a sun that refused to shine, another strange event unfolded across the world, though it would only be recognized centuries later. The year without a summer had plunged entire continents into darkness and despair, yet in a remote corner of the earth, nature revealed a spectacle unlike any other. Over the vast expanse of the Coral Sea, east of Australia, the sky played tricks that defied human understanding. This mysterious phenomenon, and noticed at the time, would later be experienced by a select few, those who braved the longest, most grueling flights in history. What had first been a celestial anomaly lost in the records of time would soon be given a name: the double sunrise. Decades later, in the midst of World War II, the world was once again thrown into chaos, and with it came the need for secrecy and survival. A hidden air route was established between Australia and Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, spanning over 30 hours in a single non-stop journey, the longest flight of its time. Pilots navigating this treacherous path carried not just military dispatches but also the weight of exhaustion and uncertainty. The flights, known only to a few, operated under the veil of wartime urgency, but they held a secret far beyond their classified missions. As these aircraft raced eastward across the ocean at just the right speed, they encountered something extraordinary, something that had once remained unnoticed in the distant past. For those aboard, the experience was both surreal and haunting. As they pushed through the skies, the sun would appear on the horizon, painting the heavens in hues of crimson and gold. But then, as they continued their relentless pursuit, the Earth's rotation seemed to fall behind. The sun, which had already risen, began to sink once more, swallowed by the very horizon it had just emerged from. Moments later, as the aircraft continued its eastward course, the impossible occurred: a second sunrise. In stunned silence, pilots and crew members bore witness to a phenomenon that defied reason: the bending of time itself. It was as if the sky had broken free from its own laws, allowing them a glimpse into a world where night and day could exist in flux. The double sunrise flights became the stuff of legend, a fleeting moment in history where human endurance and the mysteries of the cosmos intertwined. Though few ever experienced this eerie, dreamlike event, those who did never forgot it. Some described it as a vision, others as a distortion of reality brought on by exhaustion, but none could deny its truth. The sky had, for a brief moment, revealed a secret hidden in the rhythm of the earth, a secret first whispered in the unrecorded dawns of 1816, when the world itself had seemed to shift. As the double sunrise flights continued their secretive missions, strange reports began to surface, stories that could not be explained by exhaustion alone. Pilots and crew members, trapped in their dimly lit cockpits for over 30 grueling hours, spoke of shadows shifting at the edges of their vision. At first, they dismissed these fleeting glimpses as tricks of the light, illusions born from fatigue. But as the flights continued, the sightings grew more frequent, more vivid. Some swore they saw dark figures pacing just beyond the glass, as if something or someone was keeping watch from the void. Others reported hearing whispers crackling through their radios, voices too faint to be understood, speaking in languages that no one aboard could recognize. These eerie experiences unsettled even the most battle-hardened pilots, men who had survived the war's deadliest aerial battles, who had faced enemy fire without flinching. And yet, in the stillness of those high-altitude flights, a creeping unease took hold. It was as if the sky itself was haunted, as if those long hours above the earth placed them in the path of something that did not belong to the world of the living. Some of the bravest among them admitted, in hushed tones, that they had seen more than shadows. They described figures standing in midair, their outlines barely distinguishable against the blackness of space, their empty eyes fixed upon the aircraft. These figures did not drift like ordinary illusions. They stood as though anchored in place, watching, waiting. Even those who dismissed the stories could not ignore the strangeness of the flights. Instruments flickered without cause, compasses spun erratically, and a coldness settled in the cabin that could not be explained by altitude alone. The eerie occurrences followed no pattern, offered no clear answers. The crew members who endured them often chose silence over explanation, unwilling to question what they had seen or feared to confirm what they already suspected. Whether it was exhaustion, the tricks of an overworked mind, or something else entirely, the ghosts in the sky left their mark on those who witnessed them. The double sunrise flights ended as the war drew to a close, their route fading into history, buried beneath the stories of grander battles and greater victories. The aircraft that once carried their passengers through time and shadow were retired, and the world moved on. But for those who have flown the route, the memories never faded. Some took their stories to the grave, unwilling to speak of what they had seen. Others whispered their accounts in darkened rooms, their voices low with lingering fear. The sky had held its secrets well, and the truth, whatever it was, remained elusive, lost in the silence of the past. History is more than a record of wars, rulers, and discoveries. It is a catalogue of the inexplicable, moments that defy reason and force humanity to reconsider what it knows about the world. The year without summer was one such moment, when the skies dimmed, the crops withered, and an unnatural cold wrapped the earth in its grip. People looked to the heavens for answers, and found only silence. Decades later, the double sunrise flights would offer a different mystery, a distortion of time itself, where the sun defied its natural order, rising twice in the span of a single journey. These events, separated by more than a century, shared a common thread. They challenged human understanding, reminding us that the universe does not always follow the rules we expect. There is something unsettling about these anomalies, as if they are glimpses into a deeper reality, a world where nature occasionally bends in ways that cannot be easily explained. Science has unraveled many mysteries, offering explanations for the volcanic winter of 1816 and the physics behind the double sunrise flights. But explanation is not the same as understanding. Why did these moments feel so unnatural to those who lived through them? Why do they still haunt the pages of history, refusing to be forgotten? Perhaps it is because they remind us of our own fragility, of how easily the world we take for granted can slip into the unfamiliar. These stories prove that history is not merely a sequence of events but a vast, layered curtain woven with the strange and the unknown. Some mysteries yield to logic, their secrets uncovered by science and reason. Others resist, lingering at the edges, whispering to those willing to listen. They exist in the gray space between certainty and doubt, where speculation thrives and questions outnumber answers. And in that space, history does something unexpected. It shivers. Even now, in an age where data and analysis rule, the past still holds its shadows. For every solved mystery, A dozen more remain buried in time, waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps the greatest lesson history teaches us is that the unknown is not something to fear, it is something to explore. The strange, the uncanny, and the unexplained are not signs of ignorance but invitations to curiosity. And so, the stories of endless winters and twin sunrises live on, not just as relics of the past, but as reminders that history is never truly finished. It is always waiting for someone to ask the next question. Thanks for tuning into the past. Don't forget to subscribe and join me for more stories that shaped our world.